It's a curious thing, isn't it, that the ego runs around frantically trying to manage the universe, and then one day it just gets tired enough that something much softer in us starts to giggle at the whole show. I spent a lot of my life polishing my personality like a shiny badge, until I finally noticed the one who was polishing wasn't who I really was at all. The first time my heart broke so completely that my cleverness couldn't fix it, I discovered there was a place in me that wasn't broken at all, just quietly watching. In India, sitting in front of this old fat man wrapped in a blanket, I found out the hard way that a guru's main job is not to make you feel holy, but to take away every place you hide from love. It turns out that when you really start to see your own neurosis with kindness, everybody else's madness becomes much easier to love. Marching at a nuclear protest with my ego waving a banner of righteousness, I learned that if you make an enemy of the one holding the gun, you've already lost the real battle. Some days the witness is very lofty and serene, and some days the witness is just watching me eat another cupcake and think it's spiritual work, and somehow that too is part of the path. When you really look closely, service stops being me helping you and turns into this strange, tender discovery that it's all one being moving its own energy around. The cosmic joke is that you spend years trying to become somebody spiritual, and what finally liberates you is discovering how exquisitely safe it is to be nobody at all. And in the end, when the ego collapses into simple presence and the soul has had its quiet laugh, all that's left is this very ordinary, very holy moment of just being here now, together. So here we are, you and I, sitting together in this strange little moment of time, listening to an old man talk about something that cannot really be said. He talked about. And the title they gave me today is about the ego getting tired and the soul starting to laugh. Isn't that marvelous? You can already feel your ego perk up and say, oh good, a new spiritual task. We're going to get tired in just the right way so the soul can laugh. We can do that. We're very good at being tired. The ego loves assignments. It loves spiritual assignments even more than worldly ones, because then it gets to be special and holy. I'm not just anybody, it says. I'm a seeker. I meditate. I suffer more consciously than the others. And you can feel the little chest puff up, even about humility. I'm humbler than you. After a while, that game gets exhausting. Not because the ego is bad, but because it's just a very limited instrument being asked to do an infinite job. It's like hiring an overworked clerk to run the cosmos. The poor thing is trying to manage your career, your relationships, your enlightenment, your image on the street, your childhood wounds, your karma from 14 lifetimes, and what people will think of you when you die. That's a lot of paperwork. And then one day, maybe it's in the middle of a divorce or a diagnosis or just a Tuesday afternoon when the dishwasher breaks, there's this moment where the ego sort of slumps in its chair and says, I give up. I can't do this. And if you're very quiet, if you don't rush in to fix it, you can hear something else in you, almost like a little bell of laughter, very soft, very kind. The soul is starting to enjoy the show. You see, from the soul's point of view, all this melodrama is beautiful. It's like clouds drifting through a vast sky. The thunder, the lightning, the big storm of my life. To the soul, it's interesting, it's rich, it's learning. To the ego, it's disaster, emergency, breaking news. We're always in breaking news. Up next, how you failed again. When I was Dr. Richard Alpert, I was very busy being somebody. I had the right degrees, the right office, the right reputation. People looked at me in a certain way, and I thought, this is who I am. But it never quite fit. It was like a suit that looked good in the mirror, but always pinched at the shoulders. Every achievement just moved the goalpost. If they respected me, I worried they would stop. If I got what I wanted, I worried I would lose it. The ego's job description is never satisfied, always on duty. And then along came this peculiar adventure with consciousness-expanding chemicals, and then India, and then this fat old man in a blanket named Neem Karoli Baba, whom we called Maharajji. I didn't go to India to get a guru. I went to get high in a more reliable way. Instead, I got dismantled. Bad luck, I guess. I remember sitting in front of him, my mind racing. Here I was, this Harvard psychologist, and I'm kneeling in the dust in front of an old man who keeps throwing fruit at me and telling jokes I only half understand. He looks at me like he knows every thought I've ever had and isn't particularly impressed by any of them. You know how unnerving that is? The ego is used to being admired for its thoughts. He just kept looking at my heart instead. At one point, something broke. I can't even tell you exactly when. It wasn't a big explosion, more like a quiet crack. All the rearrangements of personality, all the identities. I'm smart, I'm a failure, I'm spiritual, I'm unworthy. They just loosened. And in that looseness, there was this stillness that had been there all along. Awareness, just awareness. It didn't care whether I was a Harvard professor or a fool in a blanket. It just was. And in that moment, to my great surprise, I felt myself smiling. Not the smile of, I finally did it, but a smile like, oh, this is the joke. I've been trying to become someone special in a universe where no one is separate. The soul laughs, not cruelly, but with such sweetness. It laughs the way a loving mother laughs when her child puts a paper crown on his head and declares himself king. The ego hears all this and gets very nervous. What do you mean I'm not who I think I am? If I'm not this story, this wounded child, this activist, this teacher, this lover, this sinner, this saint, then who am I? And that's where the spiritual work begins to get very subtle. Because we're not trying to kill the ego. We're not waging war on our humanity. We're just inviting it to sit down and rest. Imagine that inside you there's a very busy little character who's been driving the bus your whole life. He's checking the map, honking the horn, yelling at other drivers, worrying about the gas, criticizing the passengers, and obsessing about whether the bus looks okay from the outside. That's the ego. And somewhere in the back of the bus, leaning against the window, watching the scenery with quiet eyes, is the soul. You don't have to throw the ego off the bus. You just gently say, "Sweetheart, you look tired. Why don't you sit back for a while? Let's see what happens if we let a deeper wisdom steer." One of the ways the ego gets tired is through suffering. It's not that suffering is good, it's just very efficient. When life doesn't go according to our plans, the ego's strategies fall apart. We lose the job, the relationship, the health, the role we were attached to. We do everything right, and it still falls apart. That's rough. It hurts like hell. And that hurt, if we let it, can open us. I remember sitting with a man who had just lost his partner. He came to see me, and he was broken. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. He said, "Ram Dass, I did all the practices. I meditated, I prayed, I tried to be conscious, and she still died. What's the point?" And I looked at him, and I could see two things happening at once. There was this raw human grief, and there was the ego's outrage. This shouldn't happen to me. I had a deal with the universe. Very gently, I said, "Can we be with the grief without the story of the deal?" He glared at me, which is understand. Bess, when your heart is broken, spiritual suggestions can feel like salt. So we just sat. We breathed. We didn't try to fix it. Slowly the rage quieted, and what remained was this naked ache. We stayed there together. After a long time, he whispered, "It's so empty, and somehow it's full." That's the soul's laughter beginning, right there inside the emptiness. You see, emptiness is not a cold void. It's spaciousness. It's the sky without clouds. Thoughts, emotions, roles, they're like weather, storms passing through. Most of us have spent our lives identifying with the weather. I am the thunder. I am the rain. I am the fog of confusion. No wonder we're exhausted. The invitation of the spiritual path is to discover that we are the sky, not the storm. And when the ego is tired enough, when it can't keep holding on to every cloud, something relaxes, and we whisper to ourselves, "Oh, I'm the sky." I didn't come to this gracefully. I came kicking and screaming and analyzing. Once, back in the days when I was very serious about being spiritual, I had the beads, the robes, the whole thing, I went to see Maharajji hoping for some lofty teaching. He looked at me and said, "You love people?" I thought, oh, good, I can answer this one. "Yes, Maharajji, I love people." He shook his head. "You tell the truth?" I hemmed and hawed and tried to find a spiritual way to say sometimes. He laughed. He said, "Love everyone, tell the truth." That was the teaching. Love everyone, tell the truth. The entire path in 4 words. Infuriatingly simple. The ego wants complicated techniques. It loves 15-step programs to enlightenment. The soul keeps offering these simple, devastating instructions. Just be here, just love, just tell the truth. And then we discover how very hard that is. The difficulty shows us where we're still clinging to our roles, our fears, our separateness. Each moment of difficulty is like a mirror. We see where we're holding on. We see the little knot of me tightening, and if we can cultivate just a bit of the witness, we start to notice that knot without becoming it. The witness is like a quiet friend sitting beside you, watching the movie of your life. On the screen, there's this dramatic character, you. They triumph, they fail, they fall in love, they get embarrassed, they grow old. You cry with them, you laugh with them, and yet some part of you knows it's a movie. The witness doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care from a deeper place, one that isn't so terrified. Because the witness knows something the character doesn't, that behind the whole play, there is only one actor. Once, when I was back in the States, I found myself at a big anti-nuclear rally near Rocky Flats. There were thousands of us, students, monks, housewives, veterans. Everyone had banners, slogans, deep conviction. I was there too, the righteous spiritual activist. My ego had found a very noble cause. It felt good. We, the good guys, were standing up to them, the bad guys. Very biblical, very satisfying. As we marched, chanting and shouting, I noticed a line of policemen in riot gear standing there watching us. Helmets, batons, guns, these young faces trying to look tough and not quite succeeding. At first my mind did the usual thing. They're the problem. They're the force of oppression. I could feel the old patterns of us versus them rising up like a familiar wave. And then, because by then I had spent enough time having my mind twisted by love, I thought of Maharajji. I imagined him sitting there on the curb, blanket around him, looking at those policemen and saying, Ram Das, do you see? They're God too. That thought was very inconvenient to my righteous anger. It's hard to shout, power to the people, while seeing God in riot gear. So I started experimenting. As I marched, I began to look into the eyes of the policemen one by one and silently say, I see you. I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. We're in this together. Something shifted. The chant on my lips softened. I wasn't less committed to the cause. I just wasn't as identified with the good side. Activism without an enemy is a very different game. You still act to relieve suffering. You work for peace, for justice, for the environment, but you're not doing it to defeat those people. You're doing it because you can't help it, because when your heart breaks open, you see suffering everywhere, and the natural response is to serve. Karma yoga is not me, the noble doer, helping you, the helpless one. It's the one moving within itself, rebalancing. When you begin to taste that, service becomes lighter. The ego gets to rest a little. It doesn't have to carry the whole world on its shoulders. That doesn't mean you become passive. On the contrary, you may find yourself more engaged than ever. But the engagement comes from love, not from fear or hatred. You can hold a placard in one hand and a rosary in the other. You can chant for peace and see God in the general who ordered the bombs. It's a high yoga, very delicate. The ego likes to sneak back in and say, see, I'm even more compassionate than the others. I see God in everyone. I'm special in my non-specialness. There it is again, polishing its spiritual badges. Sometimes I imagine the soul watching all this and chuckling. Not in mockery, but in this tender way. The soul understands that the ego is like a child trying to help. It's carrying a load too heavy for it. When we begin to notice this with kindness, there's my ego again, trying so hard, we stop hating that part of ourselves. We stop making an enemy of our own humanity. And when we stop making an enemy of ourselves, we can stop making enemies of each other. That's where compassion is born. Not the condescending kind, but the real thing. Compassion arises when we see that everybody is caught in their own dance of forgetting and remembering, just like us. The person who cuts you off in traffic, the politician you rail against, the relative who always pushes your buttons, they're all working with their own big bundle of fear, conditioning, karma. When you see that, you don't justify harmful actions, but you understand them. You may still say no very firmly, but the no comes from clarity, not from hatred. Maharajji used to do this extraordinary thing. He would look at someone, and in that gaze, they would feel completely seen and completely loved. All their neurosis, all their confusion, their secrets, nothing was hidden. And instead of judgment, there was this immense love like sunlight pouring through. Being seen like that is terrifying and healing at the same time. Because once you've been loved in your totality, it becomes harder to believe that you are only your worst moments. One day, sitting before him, I was very caught in some personal drama. I don't even remember the content now. At the time, it felt monumental. I was in the midst of telling him, with great intensity, about my problem. I wanted a prescription. Do this practice, say this mantra, and it will go away. He just laughed. Too much thinking, he said, tapping his forehead. Don't worry so much. Love God. I thought, that's not very helpful. But he was pointing at the root of it all. The problem wasn't the situation, it was my attachment to my story about the situation. To love God, in the way he meant, is to love the totality, not just the parts we like. To love God is to look at your own fear, your own jealousy, your own aging body and say, you too are part of the beloved. It is to look at the broken systems of the world, the violence, the ignorance, and say, this too is within the one. I will work to heal it, and I will not fall into the illusion that it is outside of God. That's a very advanced curriculum. We work on it moment by moment. Back home, as the years went by, I watched my own body change. When you're young, you sort of assume the body is you. It's solid, responsive. You can make it do things. Then it starts to creak, to ache, to fail. The legs don't move the way they did. The memory gets porous. The ego panics. I'm disappearing. But something beautiful can happen there, if you let it. The identification swings away from the body toward the awareness that's been watching the body all along. After my stroke, there were days of great frustration. I couldn't speak the way I used to. I couldn't move in the same freedom. And the ego said, well, that's it, the show's over, the teacher is broken. But the soul whispered, look again. In the stillness that illness brought, I found a deeper presence. I couldn't rely on my old tricks, my fluent speech, my familiar gestures. What remained was just this, awareness, love, and the simple truth of being here. And from that place, the laughter of the soul became even clearer. Ah, so you thought you were the talking. You thought you were the walking. Now can you be the loving even in this? Personality is the costume we wear in this lifetime. Some costumes are quite ornate. Brilliant, tortured artist, powerful leader, wounded healer. Some are simple, quiet mother, anonymous worker, forgotten, old man on a park bench. From the soul's perspective, they're all just outfits. We try one on, play our role, bow, and exit. The awareness behind the role is the same, lifetime after lifetime. When you begin to sense that, the urgency of improving your costume starts to get a little ridiculous. It doesn't mean you stop growing or learning. It means the motive changes. You're no longer trying to fix yourself, so you'll finally be worthy of love. You're refining the instrument, the personality, the body, the mind, so that it can better serve, better express the love that's already there. Practice shifts from self-improvement to self-transparency. You're not building a better self. You're polishing the window so the light can shine through. And still the ego will come in and say, yes, but is my window shinier than yours? You watch that, you smile gently, and you come back to the breath. You come back to this moment, just this inhalation, this exhalation, so simple, so immediate. The breath doesn't care who you think you are. It just moves in, moves out, giving you life. If you rest your attention there, even for a few seconds, you can feel the mind's stories soften at the edges. They're still there, but they're less convincing. Sometimes I say to people, just be here, now. And then we all sit there awkwardly for a moment because the mind doesn't know what to do with that. It wants a technique. But be here now is not a slogan. It's an experiment. Can you, for a breath or two, let go of past and future, of who you were and who you're supposed to become, and just feel the weight of your body on the chair, the rise and fall of your chest, the sound of these words, the silence between them. In that tiny opening, the soul's laughter is already humming. You may not hear it yet, but it's there, like a melody just beneath the noise of the world. We keep discovering that we are not who we thought we were. First, we think we're the body. Then we see we're not just the body, we're the thoughts. Then we watch the thoughts come and go and realize we're not them either. We're the awareness behind them. And then at some point, even awareness loses its boundaries. And we find that the awareness looking out of these eyes is not separate from the awareness looking out of your eyes. One consciousness wearing billions of faces, owning none of them, loving all of them. So the ego gets tired. It gets tired of pretending to be separate. It gets tired of defending its little island. When it rests, the soul laughs, and the laughter sounds a lot like love. It's a laughter that says, oh, sweetheart, you never needed to try so hard. You were home the whole time. You might ask, what do I do with all this? How do I live? And the answer isn't very glamorous. You live this moment. You tell the truth as kindly as you can. You notice where you're holding on and soften your grip. You serve where you're called to serve. You forgive yourself for being human over and over and over. You remember, forget, and remember again. When you're washing the dishes, you feel the bishun. Arm water on your hands. When you're talking to a friend, you listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. When you're angry, you notice the tightness in your chest and the stories in your mind. And maybe, just maybe, you seek a little space before you act. When you see someone suffering, you ask, how can I be of use? Not from guilt, but from the joy of being part of the one taking care of itself. There will still be days when you feel utterly caught, when the ego seems to be running the whole show again. You'll find yourself arguing, judging, worrying, rehearsing old grievances like favorite songs. On those days, the most spiritual thing you can do may simply be to notice, very gently, here we are again, still human, still learning. That softness toward your own stuckness, that is grace. I used to think awakening would mean I'd transcend all my neuroses and never get reactive again. Now I see it more as a change in relationship. The patterns may still arise, but they are held in a much larger space. Like waves on an ocean that is not disturbed by its own surface. The trick is not to get rid of the waves, but to remember the ocean. And we help each other remember. You and I and all the other souls wandering around in various costumes, we are, as I've said before, just walking each other home. Sometimes we stumble, sometimes we carry one another, sometimes we need to be left alone for a while. But the direction is the same for all of us, back toward that place in ourselves that is spacious, loving, and free. So here we sit, in this odd intimacy of shared listening. You there, perhaps with your own doubts and pains and secret hopes. Me here, with my patched together stories and old man's body. And between us, or maybe within us, there is this quiet presence that has been unchanged since the day you were born and long before that. If you let your attention rest there for just a moment, you may feel a sweetness, a tenderness, as if something vast and gentle is holding you. That presence does not need you to be better than you are. It does not need you to fix yourself before you can be loved. It is loving you now, in your confusion, in your fear, in your occasional clarity. It loved you when you were a child and didn't know your own name. It will love you when you take off this body like an old coat and step into whatever comes next. The ego, poor dear, will go on chattering for a while. Have I made progress? Am I doing this right? What will happen to me? Let it talk. You don't have to silence it. You just don't have to believe everything it says. Sit with it the way you'd sit with a frightened friend. Offer it a cup of tea. Say, I'm here. We're okay. And in that gentle companionship with your own mind, with your own heart, with the world around you, you may notice that the edges of me and you begin to soften. The world starts to look a little less solid, a little more like a dance. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, success and failure, they move through like the changing light of day. Behind it all, the same awareness, the say-so, me love. The ego gets tired, the soul starts laughing, and the laughter gradually carries us into a silence that is not empty but full of presence, full of us, and yet belonging to no one. Just this, just here, just now. Let yourself rest there for a moment if you like. No effort, no strain, nothing to become, nothing to understand, only this breath, this heartbeat, this mysterious awareness that is reading these words and is at the same time far beyond them. Just be here now.